And this next panel, we're talking about the leading edge of tech. Sex isn't just a fancy dildo anymore. The term includes everything from advanced VR, AR content to artificial intelligence, fraud prevention technologies, hosting advancements, and so much more. How is tech pushing the boundaries of what is possible now and where it is heading? Knowing allows you to make smart decisions and earn far more profit right now and far into the future alike. Now, today's moderator is Stewart Tung, from the president of EngineFood. Stewart is the owner of EngineFood.com, a company that offers marketing consultation, SEO, and business development for many brands inside and outside of the adult industry. In recent years, he has worked closely with many of the top brands in virtual reality in a variety of roles and continues to maintain a direct connection to the pulse of VR online and offline as the industry evolves. Stewart, I'm going to hand over the conch to you. Go ahead.
Hello, I hope everyone can hear me okay. I am the owner of EngineFood. My company sells roughly 4.5 million words in English every year, provides SEO services and business consulting for a lot of the largest and some of the smallest brands in adult and in mainstream. We are doing an interesting panel today in that it's about the leading edge of tech. And unlike a lot of the other panels that you may have already seen, tech is something that is pervasive and affects every single part of the industry. So it's not a situation where you need to be in a particular niche or you need to be making money in a certain way in order for the information we're going to provide to be helpful to you. Fortunately, we have some really excellent people on this panel, and I'm going to introduce them to you now. Actually, they can probably introduce themselves, would be a good idea. Sky, do you want to start us off?
Sure. My name is Sky Stebnicki. I'm in charge of engineering, so all the technology and product strategy at Streamate. Some of you may have heard of it. Tiny little cam company around here. No, we stream a lot. We stream a lot of content to the world and enjoy an engineering-first culture. We really put the majority of our effort into building phenomenal products through superior engineering.
Christopher, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Christopher O'Connell. I'm the VP of Technology and head of the products and delivery division at MojoHost. What that means is I'm in charge of building and operating our content delivery network and our other advanced services. For those who don't know, MojoHost is a web hosting company. We've been in the business over 20 years, and we particularly specialize in adult and other high traffic services that require significant quantities of bandwidth. So that's what we do.
I think people have heard of MojoHost, fortunately. Darrell, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, thank you, Stewart, and my thanks to interNEXT and our sponsors. My name is Darrell Rosebush, and I'm lucky to be in such in a panel with such great folks. Currently, I am the product lead at WankzVR, MilVR, and I also oversee production for POVR Originals and Brazil VR under the POVR brand. I've been in the industry since 1998. I started as an affiliate and working with membership sites. I have worked with live cams out in Montreal. I moved on to online dating and communities with folks like Loaded Cash, and for the last decade returned to the company I helped found years and years ago, and we've been focused on VR, and then I've been part of the process with WankzVR since the conception of the site. Unfortunately, my humor and words can be seen over almost every page, and I apologize for that.
So you did mention POVR, which is interesting because I frequently get asked by other people what's new or what's trending or what's interesting and what are people building at the moment, because I work with so many different companies in the industry. And one of the most interesting things to come out of the COVID pandemic era, when a lot of other people seemed to just kind of hold pat and wait to see how things shook out, was POVR. Can you talk a bit about what exactly that is and why it's interesting?
Oh, absolutely. And you said it correctly, where 2020 was an interesting year with a lot of ups and downs, with a lot of challenges to overcome, especially for folks in production. Luckily, in our spot, I mean, being the brand, not, talent or producers, we we had more padding. We had relationships across the industry to leverage both with our own brands and WankzVR with the strategic partnerships, but then also building out POVR.com, something we're coining as the Netflix of VR porn. And so within that, we have 14 leading studios, brands that you know and love, like VR Conk, the VR Bangers, and also WankzVR, MILFVR, TransVR, everything like that, as well as our POVR originals, which are kind of my baby. And I've taken a particular interest in pushing the limitations of what we see in today's VR, really, pushing the limits of the visuals and audio and putting more emphasis on the production values, the feelings people get when they enter VR. And the product is POVR originals.
So it's interesting because when I started talking to Panos about doing a panel for interNEXT, he asked me if I would be willing to moderate the VR panel again, because I had done that the last couple of years for him. And I said I was afraid that if we did that, we'd really be talking mostly about the same stuff over again, because at this point, VR itself is not really leading edge technology anymore. People now have headsets and all the rest of it. So the interesting part of VR is the stuff that's around that at this point, like POVR is, and some of the new headsets that have come out and so on. I know the Quest 2 headset from Oculus was a very big deal. I know Apple's talking about mixed reality headsets. Is that affecting the VR market to a great deal?
Oh, well, absolutely. And just to give a little bit of context, here, I'll show this again, the Oculus Quest 2, and we'll give a couple of controllers here just to give our viewers kind of more of a context. But just over the recent holiday season, the sales of the Oculus 2 far exceeded expectations to a point where right now it is #2 headset in popularity on Steam VR, right behind the Rift S. So yeah, it has made a major impact. If you were to ask me, and I mean, folks have asked me plenty of times, where their previous iteration, and they stopped supporting this. This is the Oculus Go. This is a far more lightweight, option. The price point was great. It was perfect for us. But now we're seeing much more rich experiences come out of VR, and expectations change as well. And so, the capabilities, not only in the visual quality, but then, a variety of other control capabilities on the, and then the AR, far exceed what we've seen before. There's no surprise that it's emerged, especially when you consider the high level of accessibility you usually see in Oculus products. They're very easy to use and to get started. And very soon, Oculus has been hinting at an app platform that might make it a little bit easier for folks like us to share some of our content as well. So I'm really excited.
So Sky, streaming technology, ease of use, these are all things that you've been dealing with for quite a while on a traditional flat screen, but with live streaming content. What's new from a technological standpoint with all of that?
Yeah, I think this came forefront in the mainstream as well with the pandemic. Suddenly everybody is live streaming constantly. The entire world is dealing with it. And as I think most of us discovered, and most mainstream companies, it turns out that really, really fluid video at massive scale is extremely difficult to do. So a lot of the innovations that we've been working towards lately has just been distributed video that allows us to pull 4K, to tens of millions of users at once with sub-second latencies. Those types of technologies are they're kind of boring to talk about, but they make all of the difference when it comes to communicating with people. The other thing that we've been investing pretty heavily into is research around meshing AIs that use bifocal type lenses so that you could actually do things like have eye contact when you're talking to people on the screen. Those little psychological nuances that we get in a high fidelity when we're face to face, we take for granted until suddenly everybody's remote. And in our business, that every little increment in that fidelity has a massive impact on revenue. So we're very keen and motivated to basically reduce the distance between human communication. So that's what we've been working on.
Christopher, I'm hearing a lot more people are now using Zoom and are online all the time and so on. And from a hosting standpoint, I'm sure that's exciting, but it's got to be a nightmare to deal with congestion on end user networks and so on. I constantly see Brad's buying another pallet full of terabit drives and all the rest of that. What are you guys working on in order to maintain the throughput for all of your clients?
So, as I'm sure has been the case for others on this panel, the last year has been just a really crazy time for us, because at the same time as we had customers who were coming to us saying, we need to ramp up this, that, or the other usage because it's critical to our business, we were facing lockdowns and supply chain shortages and stuff like that. So it hasn't just been, I mean, it's been great that customers are using more bandwidth and that so much more is moving online, but it's also been a huge challenge for us to stay ahead of the supply chain and the shutdowns, and one city, one data center can't get people there. So we've, over the last year, we've been working really hard on building out an additional data center that's 100% owned by us, to take some of that variability out of our hands of other suppliers and stuff, so we can really control that experience from end to end. And we've also massively ramped up our network capacity. Most recently, we've told a few customers about this. I'm not sure we've made a major public announcement about this yet, but starting at the beginning of the year, we're now offering complete DDoS protection for every server and every network that we sell, because as we've built out this capacity, we finally decided, you know what, in 2021, this is one conversation we just don't even need to have anymore. Every server that MojoHost sells comes with DDoS protection, big enough to handle over a terabit of attack traffic, and we think that's the end of the conversation for DDoS, at least for our customers.
Interesting. So one of the things you mentioned is hardware shortages, which have become a real big problem. I know General Motors announced yesterday that they're going to keep some of their factories shut down, and they're actually going to reduce what they estimate their profits to be for 2021, because chips are unavailable for what they need for the electronics for the cars. So in terms of hardware shortages, I've also noted there's been hardware shortages for the first time ever for VR headsets. In the past, it was always about who's going to buy a VR headset and how do we get them to buy them and how do we get more into homes. And I know from talking to friends of mine at Valve and elsewhere that they're having a hard time getting the best 3D graphics cards because people want to use them for crypto mining. And now they're having a hard time getting headsets into people's houses. Are you seeing that start to affect your bottom line, Darrell?
Actually, no, but I know exactly. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, as we've seen things trend from late 2020 and on to early first quarter 2021. No, but I do know what you're saying, because as soon as it started trending where all these graphics cards were being used for and grabbed up for crypto mining, I'm like, but wait. There's another use. You could be entering VR right now. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, what we see a lot of shortages in particular product lines is somewhat of a product of, the demand. And what we've seen in 2020, we've seen really big VR titles, gaming titles come up. Half-Life Alyx. We have compatible games like Star Wars Squadrons, Microsoft Flight Simulator teasing VR, even though I didn't really get it working that well on mine. But just an example, a larger section of a larger audience is becoming interested in virtual reality. And yes, more people are stuck at home. So, you hit that Christmas season. I'm willing to bet there were a lot of Oculus 2s under the Christmas trees this year. I mean, I already had mine, so I was okay. But yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised at certain points, especially over the last couple of months, people had trouble getting their hands on headsets. Just the nature of the... Yeah.
One interesting side note, just with the Microsoft Flight Simulator, it's tied into Google Maps in real time. And during the recent wildfires that were taking place, fire departments were using VR headsets and Flight Simulator to find hotspots by flying virtual aircraft through the smoke clouds to get to areas they couldn't see in order to use Google satellite imaging. So if that's leading tech, I mean, that's worth talking about as well.
I think, yeah, Microsoft Azure. The guys here can probably comment a lot more on the potential of that, but yeah, I'm amazed actually.
Yeah, they've ruined Skype, but they've optimized Flight Simulator to no end. So that was interesting to see. Something else that seems to be getting optimized is the entire mobile phone industry. The Galaxy 20 Ultra, which recently came out, has a 108 megapixel primary camera, 12 megapixel telephoto, and 5 times optical zoom on it. Sky, is 4K enough anymore for streaming? What about all the cam girls who got brand new phones with cameras who can outpace anything that we can put through the internet?
I mean, they're useless unless the viewer can actually see it and experience it. But I do think that we're headed in that direction. I mean, especially if, and I agree that the world is eventually going towards something like what we see in VR, because people want to remove the constraints of these 4 boxes, you know, that we're looking at all the time, and they want the eye contact and they want a more personal connection. So it's just obvious that it's headed there. But one of the major limiting factors has just been the number of pixels we're pushing. And it's not just the camera, you know, it's the networks and the servers and the NIC cards and, you know, supply chain. We're trying to order routers and stuff right now through Cisco, and everything's locked down just to deal with the amount of bandwidth that we're pushing. So I think it's going to grow as quickly as people will consume it, and that will happen as quickly as the hardware and software is available, as long as it's cheap. And so far, it's been pretty inexpensive. You know, I'm a software guy, so I'll say this, and I've always thought that software moves much faster than hardware. If we can get all the hardware to catch up, I think the software will be very, very quickly on top of it.
So there seems to be a myth going around, and someone brought it up to me a couple days ago, that they feel like the technologies that are coming out are going to lower the barrier to entry to a point where people will be able to just sell their content directly and won't need any companies to back them, won't need hosting companies, won't need anything. It'll just be person with a cell phone, and they instantly have access to everything. And I tried to explain to them, it's not that simple if you ever want to talk to more than one person. So, Christopher, can you just talk about the size and scope of trying to do something like make DDoS go away for everybody, or get access to be able to send throughput to everybody during a pandemic that someone with their cell phone can't just do on their own?
Sure. Well, I'm sure any of you who, you know, saw 5G phones coming out in 2021 and picked one up, whether it was a new iPhone, one of the OnePluses, or one of the new Samsungs that support 5G, discovered that your shiny new 5G network was suddenly inundated because everybody else who had a brand new iPhone wanted to go try it out right away. And, you know, so that network was overwhelmed. So to kind of put it into perspective, you know, here in the US, I'd say a lot of people still have internet connections that are 10 or 20 megabits per second. Some of us some lucky people, I think Sky probably up in Seattle might well have a gigabit, probably does to his house. But even that's 1,000 megabits per second isn't really 1,000 megabits per second. It's you and some neighbors sharing 1,000 megabits per second. To put into a perspective, the size of the attack, that like the size of the you know, our anticipated attack, for instance, building out the DDoS, we're anticipating 1 million megabits per second as like sort of our baseline of what we have to defend against. So what that means is that we're talking about hundreds of 10 gigabit fiber links to defend against that kind of an attack. And, you know, the internet is quite distributed, but it's oddly also centralized in a lot of places because networks have to connect to each other. So when, you know, I'm on my cell phone on T-Mobile, say, and I want to talk to Sky on AT&T, those networks have to communicate. And the only way that happens is in big internet exchanges, up in Seattle, Los Angeles, major cities around the US and around the world where internet traffic is exchanged. And these points are becoming real bottlenecks to all of this kind of technology. I'm sure anyone who's watched a cam stream or watched Netflix or tried to do both at the same time at primetime hours has seen this happen, where the just incredibly massive quantities of bandwidth are overwhelming these exchange points. So Hosting companies like Mojo continue to build out to more locations to exchange traffic with other networks in more locations to try to get around these bottlenecks. But nonetheless, the challenge to, it's really easy inside a lab or inside even your own home to build a network that's capable of doing 8K, 12K, even 100 megapixels between two devices for short periods of time over a very short distance. The real magic, and the thing that no decentralized technology has managed to solve yet, that no new technology has really fully managed to solve yet, is going from each of us broadcasting in one place out to hundreds, thousands, or millions of people around the world in real time with low latency. Just as an example of this, Google, which doesn't even do so much live video, a lot more canned video with YouTube and stuff, which is cacheable around the world, recently announced investment of some hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to build yet another private subsea cable between the United States and Europe to further expand their capacity, because even though they already own tens of them, it's still not enough for them to move their data back and forth. And so the simplicity of just picking up your phone and everything seems to work like magic is underlined by an incredible complexity.
So thank you for making my job as a moderator easier, because a lot of what you just said can be unpacked, and I just put 3 links into the chat that people can take a look at. The actual number that's most recently recorded is that 59% of the world has internet access. That's not broadband, that's any form of internet access. 41% of your potential customers don't even have access to the internet yet. There are roughly 3 million people in the world who are still using America Online as their primary internet provider. There's a recent bipartisan bill that's now starting to gather steam that you probably heard of, $1.9 trillion. Forgetting all the political stuff, included in that bill is $7 billion to create broadband access for people who live in rural communities within the United States. So if it was as easy as just buying a cell phone and starting your own CAM network, people wouldn't be spending $7 billion to bring connectivity to areas that you're currently not in. And then Parr points out Starlink as a potential solution for this, and it may actually be one. They're now taking pre-orders of $99. Then they're saying that it's going to come out in 6 months to a year, but it's Elon Musk, so it could be 2 months or it could be 10 years. But they're talking about having connectivity again in all of these other areas. Richard says that 59% is low. That may be true, but the link says it's 59%, so I'm going to go with their information until I hear otherwise. So Sky, with those numbers, do you think that the technology is going to scale faster than the demand? Because there's a lot of people putting a lot of money into pushing more people online very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't think so. I think we are bumping up against some very difficult problems that are challenging even our basic premise of how we write software and manage hardware. Not the least of which is our physical limitations. Clearly we can't even get servers through the supply line. And I think it's going to require a pretty major investment in robotics and AI for supply line, for physical development of things, for servers, for devices. No, I think we're going to experience greater demand than we have capacity. And it's going to be on engineering. I mean, engineering, Harvard Business Review published a paper a few years ago that it's 17 times harder now to make an iterative leap in innovation. And that's because the problems are getting infinitely more complex. At the lower level, users are seeing easier and easier. At the higher level, just take AI, the barrier of entry for AI. You can't just go read a Sam's Teach Yourself AI in 21 days and then suddenly write $1 billion company anymore. It takes massive amounts of data and millions of dollars in hardware, and it's a very complex problem. So I think we're gonna experience some lag. It's good for us in tech because there's always work, but we've got our work cut out for us. And I think the world's gonna outpace where we are for a little while, personally.
So one of the interesting ways to look at it is that price has always been an artificial way to slow down the push through. So if you run a pay site and you're getting more traffic than your servers can handle, you can always increase your price, which would then affect how many people are streaming whatever it is. But when you take a freemium model, like a MyFreeCams or a Tube site or somebody else where they're open access to everybody, are those models going to be pressured, do you think, Sky, by the increase in people who are coming online as rapidly as they are?
Yeah, absolutely. They're already pressured. They're already strained. I mean, look at what YouTube is doing. They're pushing every damn thing they possibly can to monetize right now because it's expensive. You know, they're running these lines, and every time I open my app, they're trying to push me into the premium TV service, and I don't blame them. You know, they're trying to find some way to make money for all of this additional traffic, and so far they've done pretty well. But I do think also they're going to bump up against some issues around the freemium model of advertising because more and more of the public is becoming aware. We saw Tim Cook recently just thrashed on the advertising model because people are realizing that in order to pay for all of that, we are the customer. You know, that's what's happening is they're basically selling us to advertisers. And there's some pretty major privacy ethics violations going on there that I think the public is just now catching on to. And it's going to get worse. So I think companies are going to have to innovate and move to more subscription models, more pay models, you know, revenge of pay sites, something that makes this a more viable financial model.
So we've brought up Google a couple of times in a few different ways, trying to have more connectivity, trying to do other things. Their core business is still search engine optimization and so on. And one of the most interesting things that have happened with them recently is in the area of artificial intelligence, they laid out over $1 billion to license technology from OpenAI, which went into what they named their Google BART patch. I do a lot of SEO work for a lot of people, and they were asking me why their traffic all of a sudden fell apart a few months ago. So I just want to take a moment to point out what is actually going on. Google licensed from OpenAI technology that allows them to scale their ability to monitor users across multiple platforms. And so the old days of keyword stuffing and all the other things that went on back in the day are now effectively over because you can't keyword stuff your presence on every single platform across the entire internet. What people fail to understand about artificial intelligence is that at its core, all it really is time compression. Artificial intelligence is allowing a system to do trial and error at a rate that no human can comprehend. You're doing trial and error at a rate of 40,000 iterations per second. So it's not that AI is necessarily smarter, it's that AI gets so many more chances to make the correct decision about anything than a human would get. And so when you start getting into things like SEO, where AI is becoming dominant at this point, it's checking your social media profiles, all of the links to your website, links that are mentioning or mentions of your site everywhere else. It can get into podcasts and audio and all the rest of it to determine what someone is actually interested in finding when they do a particular search, which means gaming the system is getting harder as well. So with VR in particular, you guys have a much higher value per user than a lot of the other areas of adult. Is that something that you think you can make use of in order to sort of secure your market?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I'm glad you brought this up because I think, Stewart, I know how much content you're providing for other brands across our industry. I know we're a little bit on the fringe because I tend to do, and my team tends to do a lot of our text content that includes, you know, our outreach, our press releases, our social media, you know, that kind of activity. The thing is, our community, the community behind virtual reality, is so strong and so supportive. You know, you have these very rich sources of content, these Reddit subreddits, our own member forum. There's a whole bunch of places where this not only the technology is discussed, but then also, you know, the individual productions and how the performers perform in that kind of scenario in a 180 degree environment. So, you know, we naturally get a boost because of how passionate people are. And even some of the more successful affiliates that work under Pimprel, with our offers, you see them as providing much more rich content, heavier reviews, because that's the kind of thing that, say, if you're not familiar with virtual reality, you're going to respond to something like that. And so, yeah, we do get a little boost. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah. So Sky, a friend of mine recently bought a Samsung 8K television. And being the jerk that I am, I immediately told him he wasted his money because no one is filming anything in 8K, and it'll be 20 years before he can actually watch anything other than the demo video.
Yeah.
He then told me how wrong I am, and I found out what it's actually doing is upscaling the video in real time, frame by frame, to 8K from a 1080p feed.
Yeah.
And I can tell you it looks amazingly better than 4K, and it works on virtually all television content that comes through the TV. And the only downside to it was I think he paid $12,000 for his television. Is that kind of software-based upscaling to stuff like 8K something we're going to start seeing on streaming platforms?
We already do some of that. We do have smoothing going on. We have image enhancement. For sure, yeah, more and more. A lot of the newer compressions and layered compressions are using technologies like that already, and they'll continue to use more and more. I think that'll really help as demand outpaces supply, especially when it comes to bandwidth. We'll get smarter and smarter with compression too to make that work. WebRTC is a really rapidly developing front on this, where the encoders that they're using are getting increasingly good at layering, and if they can get to the next level of scalable video codecs where you don't even have to transcode video, it's actually going out in layers and just delivering exactly what the device is capable of handling. All of that will be dependent upon AI-based compression technology to make it look as smooth as possible.
So we've got a question from Amelia, and she's saying that AI is terrible at knowing what she wants to see, especially in the social space. Does anyone have a sense if there's a personality profile or types of demographics which AI is more effective for? And if so, what factors make that the case? I have some thoughts on that. Do you guys have anything you'd like to add?
So, I mean, AI is such a broad term that, the word AI gets thrown around, and it's in some ways sort of like saying math. Math does everything from send rockets into space to balance our checkbooks. And so, you've got AI in the realm of recommendations, which was probably one of the very first broadly deployed AI type systems, and indeed so broadly deployed that now with Stewart, I'm sure even with these sort of AI recommendation systems and content systems, we're actually starting to be able to game them with SEO type strategies and stuff like that. And then you've got AI like Sky's been talking about, where you're talking about using it to interpolate image data. You've got AI like we talk about, where it has to do with our routing decisions and stuff like that. So AI is kind of very broadly like sort of a whole realm of technology that deals with these kinds of tools and algorithms. When it comes to recommendations, though, there's been a number of really interesting studies lately that the training data for these AIs are only, when it comes to recommendations, you should watch this, you might like that, is only as good as the training data. And in many cases, those training data sets are surprisingly small. Maybe they're just generated from internal employee usage at some big companies, or some random data set that's not necessarily representative of the true cross-section of society. We certainly see this with there have been some scandals with image recognition systems that were trained on data sets that only had white people. Well, guess what? Those AIs can only recognize white people. And that's not even necessarily a knock against the engineers specifically, but more broadly against looking at what is it you're trying to build. If you're an engineer and you're given this data set and somebody says, hey, make an AI that can recognize these images, you go, okay, and you do it. And so more broadly, it's a discussion about the quality of the data and making sure that our data sets are an inclusive representation of society.
So one of the things that got me originally interested in AI was AI text generators. I sell 4.5 million words of original copy every year, and I figured, fuck it, I could just push a button on my keyboard and suddenly it would just generate all that for me. So I actually spent close to 8 months tracking down AI text generators, talking to people who are in academia and so on, got to a guy who is at the leading edge of all of that technology. And what I found out is, if you want to write a term paper for college to get a grade on, they work almost flawlessly, to the point where universities are now trying to figure out how to go about dealing with it. Because when you write a paper about Moby Dick, there are 1,200 other papers about Moby Dick that you can use to train the AI and come out with a very good paper about Moby Dick. The problem when you start getting into recommendations is the only person who can truly train an AI to give you proper recommendations is you, because you're unique. There isn't 1,200 other people who all share enough about you to generate the same level of certainty. So what I would tell you is, Netflix has tried this. They've offered $10 million prizes to people that can improve their recommendation platform and all the rest of it. It doesn't work, but what people are doing is they're looking at what is being built in AI, they're looking at what they would like it to do, and then they're saying, no, 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 it actually can do this other thing. And that's what Google did. Google saw all the text generators that were coming out because they were looking into it and trying to prevent duplicate content and people like me from gaming the system. And what they found out is, no, no, we can actually use this as part of our own search algorithm in order to get more useful information about particular brands and what people might want to find them for. So they're just flipping the equation, and rather than using the output of what goes into the AI, they're essentially using the input side of it. When we talk about AI specifically, I know you have a background in it, Sky. What other uses of it do you think are going to come out in the near future for adult?
Yeah, let me real quick throw something in there about the
Sure.
social network, because I thought it was an interesting question, and it's important to like how we interact with systems right now. It's important to know that on social networking, good is a subjective term when we say the recommendations are not good, because their goal is not to make us happy. Their goal is not to inform us. Their goal is not to make us smarter. Their goal is to keep us clicking. And that may be an article that just pisses you off constantly. You're just going to see these things rolling up, and they're confirming data is you clicked on it, and it may just made you mad and hate your life and miserable and want to rage hate on everybody else that you see. Well, that's a success to them. And it's kind of up to us to realize that they don't share our goals when it comes to good in social media. And that's just the reality of the premium tech model they're selling us. And so they need to keep us engaged on that front. A way I game the system is if I see like a clickbait title or something stupid like that, or something that gets my emotions immediately triggered, I don't click the damn thing. Like, I'm not going to give them that confirmation because I know they're going to be learning from that data. I don't know how much that helps at the global scale, but at my personal scale, it is at least satisfying to make sure that they're not playing me like a fool. There's an interesting, one of the AI researchers for Google actually mentioned this. He said, we always thought AI would take us over by becoming stronger than us and like kind of this apocalyptic world, but really it took us over by exposing our weaknesses, you know, which is like chasing around all of these useless clicks, and suddenly you're like 3 hours just passed and you have no idea what you just watched on YouTube. You know, that's all intentional. That's part of the AI system. To your question about like AI, what's the applications, I think there are many, and many we haven't even begun to touch. I think it's almost limitless in terms of dynamic pricing and text generation and collaborative filtering and things like that. One area that's really become relevant lately is in like identity protection and privacy. You know, we all know what's going on in the news right now around Pornhub and some of the pressures that are going on in society, to especially those of us who are the bigger players, to make sure that there's nothing shady going on in adult. And I think those of us with the capacity to do that through technology, through biometrics, through you know, learning algorithms to try to figure out age and compliance and make sure everything is above board is going to be a huge field for the big players in this industry over probably the next few years to come.
So taking your first point first, that good is not necessarily good, and that it's grayer than that. There was a large amount of stuff written about Facebook adding the new care icon, that you could care about something as opposed to just liking it, because the real reason for that is that Facebook understood that liking something is too binary. If somebody mentions that their dog died and you would click like, you sound like an awful person in some regard, but you're not liking it for that reason. And so what they did was they gave people a way to self-segment, and now they're crowdsourcing a human ability to self-segment and mixing it with the AI of tracking each of those individual signals in order to come out with a better profile. So getting back to
I would say the key on that is even that is just an input. The output that they're training against is engagement. How long are you on the site? So even the likes only matter in so much as can it keep you checking your phone 24 times a day or 30 times a day and keep that number growing, because that's their internal metric, because that's how they sell it to advertisers.
But they're trying to see why you're staying on the site. Are you staying on the site because you're lonely? Are you staying on the site because you're feeling romantic? Are you staying on the site because whatever? And so they've decided that AI can't determine that just from your posts and so on, but you can. And so they've given you a cutesy way of self-identifying over and over and over again with all different content in order to get a better profile. So to Amelia's point, I think you'll get much better recommendations if you start liking things much more specifically and much more carefully in order to give them more of your information. You're essentially training the AI as it applies to you. The more private you are as a person, the worse your recommendations are going to be. Another way that AI is already coming out, going back to OpenAI again, is what's being referred to as DALL-E, which I've mentioned a couple of times on other panels because I think it's amazingly cool. But if you remember the old sites like 99 Designs, where you could start a design contest to get your logo, and then whoever won, you would pay $300. And unfortunately, an awful lot of people would cancel the contest after they got the design they wanted. But in any case, DALL-E is an AI where you can type in one phrase in text, and then it will iterate hundreds of examples of that. And so the examples they use on their website is a chair shaped like an avocado. And it will immediately make hundreds of those images of different chairs shaped like an avocado. So again, they're not relying on the AI to make the perfect thing that you want. They're relying on the AI to do the iteration, which normally takes so long for someone else to do that trial and error, and then for you to go and pick your favorite 5 over and over and over again until it narrows itself down to the one you want. You're essentially working for the AI rather than the AI working for you. So what else have we missed? We've got about 10 minutes left, and I don't want to miss anything. Anybody?
Well, I just want to, I'll just, no, go ahead.
Pretty good
Darrell,
panel.
Go ahead. Actually, I was just going to see what you guys thought.
So I was actually just going to throw out there, given this discussion around AI and trust and all that stuff, a book that's now, I just Googled it and realized it's almost 8 years old, but the great cryptographer Bruce Schneier, about 8 years ago, wrote a wonderful book called Liars and Outliers that discusses data and sort of social media interaction and how that leads to algorithms and stuff. And for anybody who's been interested in some of the more social aspects of this discussion, it's an excellent read without too many deeply technical sections that kind of delves into the underlying technology on this.
Darrell?
Oh, I just wanted to add, honestly, I don't have as much to add about AI as the rest of the folks here, other than, obviously earlier on, Sky had touched on, the impact of video upscales using AI. And even outside of adults, even though, it definitely has a place, even in virtual reality to really make, things pop, the textures, the depth. But even some of Peter Jackson's more recent projects, They Shall Not Grow Old, and his current one, The Beatles Get Back. I don't know if there's anyone here on the panel had a chance to see that trailer of The Beatles Get Back. Anyone?
No, but I saw They Shall Not Grow Old, and I learned that you do not want gangrene.
Well, that is definitely, I would say that's a lesson from that that as well. Me, I was actually thrown back by the just being able to see all of this in a new way, in a way that was previously impossible. especially that Beatles footage where, it just warmed my heart. And, I mean, I try to explain even virtual reality if someone's moving from, say, adult to a VR medium. It's almost a similar feeling when you start and you experience that for the first time, because, you're getting this new perspective. You might be, I see a performer that you might have an obsession over. And I mean, we're talking about live cams. We know the power of connection and obsession between the audience and a performer. So, you get to experience them in a new way. That's a powerful thing. So yeah, I just wanted to, mention that.
We've got a question from Edward Peterson. How do you feel the greater emphasis on privacy like GDPR will adversely affect efficiency of recommenders and AI type systems? Does anyone have a viewpoint on that?
Yeah.
In the long run,
Go ahead.
Please, Sky.
I was just going to say immediately a pretty huge effect, especially because most of the more advanced algorithms, like what Google is doing, is really based on data mining you on every single possible channel they can get. Your email, your automatic voice text that you talk into your phone, even listening to you while your phone is on or off, things like that. And all of that is subject to GDPR regulation, is not okay. You can't process for those reasons. So I think immediately we're going to have a pretty big hit and a lot of battles going on. We're experiencing this with our recommendation engines, trying to navigate those waters. But in the long run, and maybe this is where Chris is going, I think that we're getting so much better at anonymization and pseudo-anonymization that we'll work our way around it. Eventually, we'll be able to solve it. It's just a lot more expensive. It's a lot harder, requires higher powered engineers for now, and then we'll eventually commoditize it. But our latest iterations don't have any private information in the recommendation engines, and we're just going to keep moving that forward. And I know Google's got like browser-based neural nets running now that just run on your machine, and you don't have to worry about anything going back to the server. And you're going to have more and more of that happening. I don't think it's going to stall us too long.
Christopher?
Sky summed it up perfectly what I was going to say. Yeah, short term, sure, but there's been a tremendous, I mean, these companies, of course, see this happening, and there is tremendous money being spent on research of how to build these same types of systems that nonetheless stick to the letter of the law of laws like GDPR and CCPA.
So we have another question. Assuming we don't need to focus on slight improvements and we can go fast, what would be your new favorite technology? So I'll answer that one first. My new favorite technology is search the way that it happens in 2021 instead of the way that it happened in 1999. As someone who does essentially white hat SEO work for a lot of different companies through EngineFood, I like when I do a search and I get results of things that I actually did want to see. And if you have a Google Home or an Amazon Echo or any of those devices, natural language search has taken incredible leaps forward at this point. And that's only going to go faster and faster as the AIs get better and better. You guys, what's your favorite technology of the moment?
I mean, if we didn't have to iterate slowly and speed was not an issue, I would say probably blockchain, because it has the potential anyway to give people back control of their data, to grant it based on permissions, and to make sure that no one entity, not even a government, can own it. So you can use it for like medical records and banking and stuff like that. It's got obviously scale limitations where we're missing all of these servers now, and NVIDIA is sold out. But if we could solve all of that immediately, I think that technology would be amazing. I would use a Twitter based off of blockchain if it were technically possible right now.
Darrell?
Wow, actually, that surprised me, but you got me thinking. I partially agree, because like I've since a blockchain became, on the forefront of news and interest, I've always loved the idea of managing that data, doing those checks and having that ledger. Not necessarily what happened with it along the way, but I totally see what you're saying. For me, it's, I mentioned things like Microsoft Azure and being able to share rich packets of data, very quickly. Chris obviously spent a lot of time talking about that, the potential of legitimate, live VR experiences, you know, I mean, a lot of people expect me to say like cool interactive suits and, you know, an outfit that looks like Ready Player One, but I'm not going to go that route, because for me, if you have to spend more time climbing into your VR gear than actually enjoying your adult VR, it's over, you know. So for me, it's making the best use of the audios and videos and trying to share that big data across the globe.
Chris, favorite tech of the moment?
So I'm gonna say sort of the opposite side of the same coin that Sky mentioned, which is cryptography and our improvements in it, because it's more than just about locking your banking details away. Cryptography is what powers blockchain, and it's what powers some of these amazing algorithms. So Stewart, like you said, I would love, like, the idea behind personalized search and recommendations when it works really well is great. I just, you know, I don't have an Alexa in my house because I'm not quite ready to have that persistent listener in my house yet. But underlying cryptography are the tools and technology we need to develop those kinds of experiences while still protecting and respecting users' data and privacy. And so that's sort of the transformative, just like it's part of blockchain, it's also part of these recommenders and the next generation AIs. That's sort of the enabling technology for them.
So we've only got about 1 minute left, and I'd like to take that time just to thank everyone for being here. The questions were really good. I think the panelists were excellent. So I really do appreciate you all providing a point of view on what's coming next. And the one thing I'd like to leave everyone with is, years ago, the new tech was mobile traffic or whatever, and it was all very, very obvious to everyone what the new tech was. And what's happening now is that the new tech that really matters is mostly under the surface. And so if you're not paying attention and you're not looking at what's going on in all these different places, you're missing what's actually happening. Your traffic is being tremendously affected by BART being rolled out by Google. Your streaming technology, your hosting, your everything else that makes all the stuff work is all very, very tech forward right now. And the advertising marketing part of it is lagging way behind, which is the opposite of how it used to be. So keep your eyes open. If you have any questions about any of this stuff or anything else, I would strongly suggest you talk to our panelists. They're always available, and they're terrific people. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Stewart. Thank you. Excellent.
My pleasure.
Yes.